And you and I were talking about this earlier before we came on air, and you look at the scope of the action in the last few hours, and it seems like Israel has annihilated some major leadership figures within the IRGC. So what does that tell you in terms of Iran's capacity to strike back and retaliate?
Well, that's the question at this hour, Sri, and we are getting our first reaction now from Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, who is alive in the aftermath of this attack. The supreme leader has been speaking on state TV. He says Israel will receive a harsh punishment in the aftermath of this attack. The supreme leader also saying that Israel unleashed its wicked and bloody hand in a crime against Iran, and also adds that this attack revealed Israel's vile nature. Khamenei adding here that several commanders and several scientists were martyred in this Israeli attack. So that gives you a sense of exactly how the Iranians are responding at this hour. Of course, Iran's armed forces spokesman also saying Israel and the US will pay a heavy price for this Israeli attack. What we've seen unfold in the last few hours is Israel launching direct airstrikes on Iran in what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling a preemptive operation against Tehran's nuclear program. Netanyahu speaking earlier saying Israel struck Iran's main uranium enrichment facility, targeting Iran's top nuclear scientists and hitting the core of its ballistic missile program. He said this operation would continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. Now, what's most significant here is that Iran has also confirmed now that Hossein Salami, the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, was killed in this strike. He was reportedly at IRGC headquarters in Tehran when the building was hit. That is a very significant development. The IRGC is one of the core apparatuses of the Iranian state. It controls significant functions of the government, and its reach touches almost every angle of operations inside of Iran. So this marks one of the most serious escalations in the Israeli-Iran tensions that we've seen in years. And what's also most significant here is that the United States says it was not directly involved. It's very interesting to see Israel essentially acting unilaterally here to achieve its goals. And of course, Israel also declaring a national state of emergency now. We heard earlier from Israel's defense minister saying that missile and drone attacks from Iran are now likely. So there is an effort now underway in Israel to prepare its population for what could be a response from Iran. What that response looks like, of course, remains to be seen at this point. But given the messaging that we're now seeing from the Iranians and Iran's supreme leader in the aftermath of the killing of the top commander of the IRGC, it is likely that we will see a response. Of course, a big question mark about what that is going to look like. Sri, also important to point out here that this strike comes just days after we saw the UN nuclear watchdog found Iran in violation of its nuclear obligations for the first time in 2 decades, actually putting out a document saying that it was in breach. And of course, that just adds fuel to this significant fire in the aftermath of what has been real concerns on the ground in Israel. Israeli officials growing increasingly alarmed over signs that the US and Iran were perhaps nearing a new nuclear agreement, a deal that Israel viewed as dangerous and unacceptable. Israel, of course, making clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear enrichment program. And the fear on the ground inside Israel was that given the negotiations that we've seen unfolding between the US and Iran, that month after month, back and forth, those negotiations continue to unfold without a deal in place. Israel was clearly concerned that perhaps the United States might have come to some kind of an agreement that would have seen an enrichment program being allowed. That is a red line for Israel. They say, of course, that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Now, of course, the United States is also aligned with that. We've heard from US President Donald Trump, who says he, of course, would also not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But clearly, this was a bridge too far for the Israelis, which is why we've seen this response unfolding today. Of course, the region, as I said, now bracing for what could happen next. What we know is that there were scheduled talks set to take place on Sunday in Oman between the US envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian officials. Whether or not those talks will actually go ahead now, of course, remains to be seen. What this does for the future negotiations of Iran's nuclear program is also unknown at this point. Will this embolden the Iranian position on enrichment and on their nuclear program? Will this essentially stop the United States from trying to achieve that negotiation and actually getting a deal done? We still don't know. And of course, what all of this means for the Gulf states and the wider region is a big question mark at this point too. This certainly puts countries like Saudi Arabia, which does have formal ties with Iran now, and of course the UAE, also in quite a challenging position here, just given the spike that we've seen in regional tensions and the uncertainty that people in this part of the world now face as they wake up this morning to this most recent Israeli strike. Sheree?
And the oil markets are the most clearest expression of this, and we are seeing a clear reaction today to these events. And we have a map there for the viewers on the screen, pinpointing the Strait of Hormuz, which you and I know is a vital waterway. It's a choke point for almost a third of the world's oil flows. Is it at risk, Dan?
That's a great question at this point, Sri. Of course, we don't know what type of reaction we're going to see from the Iranian proxies as well, what's left of Hamas and Hezbollah, whether or not we will see some kind of response. And of course, the Houthis are also on watch at this point too. Whether or not we see that, of course, is unknown at this point. What we do know is that oil has skyrocketed off the back of this because there is a supply risk. In previous tit-for-tat conflicts, there hasn't been a supply risk, but this time is different. The Israelis are actively targeting these Iranian nuclear sites and, of course, leaving open the option. You heard there Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this operation could continue 4 days. It leaves the door open. It leaves the Israelis the option of striking oil facilities as well, which is why we have seen oil prices move higher off the back of this. Certainly off the highs of the session, at one point up double digits, now up just under 10% here. WTI sub 75, Brent now above that 75 USD handle. A real supply risk here because, of course, OPEC, Iran is also part of OPEC here, and we have seen Iranian barrels coming back on this market despite the heavy and significant sanctions that we see from the United States and others on that country. So all eyes are on what happens next with the price of oil and whether or not we will see perhaps additional Israeli action against these Iranian oil facilities too. Whether or not we also see disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz is a clear question at this point as well. Perhaps not in the immediate aftermath of this attack, but indeed in the weeks and months to come. What impact will this have on those Iranian proxies? Will they too be emboldened to perhaps also act unilaterally here? That is unknown at this point. But Shri, the region absolutely on edge here, and we're likely to see this uncertainty also filter through to risk assets when a local trade opens up as well. Losses expected in Saudi Arabia and the UAE on the equity front. And of course, what happens next, as I mentioned, with the price of oil is going to be very closely watched as well.